Well, Carrie Vierimar is a Canadian journalist and political commentator and joins us now. Carrie, of course, the visit is stirring. Prince Charles, or King Charles, as I should say, he was making his views pretty clear that he wanted to express solidarity with Canada, presumably at a time of pressure from Donald Trump. How symbolic do you think it was?
It absolutely was symbolic to see the monarch preside over this speech from the throne at a critical time. One would argue there has never been a time where Canada's sovereignty has been more under threat than the economic attacks Donald Trump has put on this country and even the rhetoric around the 51st state. So for King Charles to come over here to solidify the position as the monarch, as the head of state, but also it was an opportunity for him to solidify his position as the monarch at a time where historically support for the monarchy was slipping after the death of Queen Elizabeth. So I think this had an opportunity to be a win for Canada, a win for the monarchy, and the win for the Prime Minister. And I think it was 3 out of 3 on that front.
And it wasn't exactly a nuanced level of support, was it? Because we're used to the royal family being very, private with their views about certain things like the Donald Trump threat. And yet I think he managed to weave in something in his tone that suggested that he was with the Canadians. What do you think?
Well, certainly. And look, it is the job of the monarch to be that. He is the king of Canada. He is not the king of Britain and thus be part of Canada. He has a specific role as the monarch of this country. And I would argue even Queen Elizabeth might have been a little bit more subtle in her words. But the reality is you can go through history and you will find every monarch, every single prince and princess who has come to speak about Canada, the monarchy has largely driven a very strong tone around the importance of Canada in the world and the connection to the monarchy. And that is, I think, the really seminal thing about this. You know, like the line, every time I come to Canada, a little more of Canada seeps into my bloodstream and from there straight to my heart. King Charles, even as prince, this is his 20th trip to the country. And so I think there is, for me personally, as someone who had a much more maybe personal sentimental relationship with Queen Elizabeth, that to me struck that the monarch recognizes the moment we are in right now as a country and really knocked it out of the ballpark.
Thanks for that, Carrie. Well, let's speak now with Jen Hassam, Executive Director at the Broadbent Institute, which is Canada's preeminent social democratic think tank. Jen Hassam, presumably, obviously, King Charles was reading words read. He was reading them, the words that had been written by the Canadian government for him to read out and set out the programme. But political reaction, has there been much so far to the words that he was expressing and the tone of the words as well?
Well, yes. And I don't have necessarily the same kinds of emotional ties to the monarchy as the previous speaker, but I will say Charles' visit and those quotes, they do give you goosebumps. They're about democracy, they're about Canada, and they're about our sovereignty. And it feels good when you are under attack by one of your longest allies, the United States. And when Trump says that he wants to make us the 51st state, he's not joking. And these tariffs that are affecting Canadian jobs have real ramifications for our standard of living. So this was very well received, and online already immediately there is just overwhelmingly warm feelings towards what King Charles said and also the visit today. And this is in stark contrast, for example, with comments that Prime Minister Starmer and Foreign Secretary Lammy said, which were viewed as weak or not defending Canada against Trump a couple months ago. And that was also very instantaneous. The CBC headline at that time summed it up, saying, "As Trump attacks Canada, Downing Street sticks to the sidelines." So what an interesting reversal to see King Charles be so very public and so very warm to Canada. And even though in the UK, he has a role that is less political.
Yeah, a very good example, I suppose, of soft power, the soft power
Yes.
of the monarchy.
Absolutely. And yeah, most Canadians, I think, view the monarchy as symbolic and not political, but Charles is seen more as that kind of celebrity than a statesman. But his impact and of his visit at this time is something that is not that is not inconsistent with the kind of feelings that Canadians are looking for, as well as where we're looking for economic allies when it comes to security, social allies, even in the world. And so this kind of really overt visit to Canada is very well received.
Very touching as well, the way that the King was talking about the close relationship that always has been between Canada and the UK, going back to, for example, as he mentioned, the support by Canada during the Second World War. There is really that link that has been highlighted, I think, by the visit today.
Absolutely. So, both of my grandfathers enlisted, and it's the case for millions of Canadians. These are strong historic ties. And so Mark Carney, our prime minister, he campaigned on a very strong Canada that would stand up to Trump. And he was very explicit in saying that he was looking for to renew these historic ties with France and the UK. And this appealed to older, wealthier Canadians, homeowners who were looking for a British-tinged Canadian identity. And King Charles's presence is part of this pivot. It's part of furthering this political message and solidifying the gains that Carney made. I guess the area that is a blind spot and that we didn't hear in the speech, and this is no fault of King Charles, because as you mentioned, the throne speech is written by the governing party, is that there wasn't a lot of mention of some of the big crises that Canadians face, the bread and butter issues on a day-to-day basis, like cost of living, housing, the cost of groceries. With the tariff threats, there's a rise of anxiety when it comes to people's jobs. And so income security around unemployment insurance is something that Canadians really are looking for changes on. And ignoring these bread and butter issues like the cost of housing could be done at the peril of Carney's minority government, because of course he governs at the pleasure of support from a diminished center-left NDP, as well as the Quebec separatist BQ party. Mm-hmm. So whether or not this King Charles's speech from the throne is working this coalition is something that I think we'll see in the days to come.
And long after King Charles has flown back to the UK, yes. Political journalists in Canada and political experts like yourself will be poring over the speech and looking at it. I know I've done that myself with plenty of Queen's and King's speeches back here.